Randall, thanks very much for joining us.
Of course.
We have been talking about innovation, disruption, what comes next, the human part of this, the technical part of it, and a lot. And I just, have been looking, at your investment numbers, and you've spent a huge amount of money, about $200 billion since I understand 2009 to today. So $200 billion in wireless networks and wireline networks and mobile networks. What are you scared of that is driving you to do so much spending?
I live in fear, and if I
do you
sleep,
really?
I sleep in fear. Look, our industry is one where you can go back and look, and companies that miss one innovation cycle either don't make it or they spend a decade catching up.
So that's really important, right? Innovation cycles matter because you've got China, Japan, lots of other European firms. They're also paying attention to the same.
Yeah,
same
absolutely.
Thing.
I mean, you can go through example after example, but just BlackBerry. They missed one innovation cycle, and BlackBerry stopped making devices now. They announced, I guess, last week, right? So it really is. It's moving that fast, and the pace and the investment to catch up is huge in this industry, and so you just can't afford to fall behind.
So I didn't realize this, that AT&T is 140 years old, basically, and it used to be against the law to mess around with a phone book, right? Because you had all these
we don't
kind
even
of
sell
rituals
phone books anymore.
Yeah. So how has the company? How much of that old spirit is left, or have you just dismantled it all? Because Boeing is 100 years old. The Atlantic was founded in 1857, and there aren't a lot of institutions that have been around that long. Because you've got Facebook that's 12 years old. You've got other companies that are coming on and displacing a lot of players. In media, we're declining all over in places and whatnot. How do you stay fresh and alive at 140 years old?
Well, I would start off by saying you never hear those words come out of my mouth, 140 years old. And I just think it's anathema to what we're trying to do, to look backwards. Mm-hmm. And looking backwards, it goes kind of with the prior comment we just made. It can be death in an industry like this. In fact, if you walk into our headquarters building in Dallas, you don't see any old telephones hanging on the wall. You don't see any old gear that's kind of, as a museum type thing. Everything is forward-looking. We have to keep looking forward. Mm-hmm. And I think if you don't do that, you run into problems. I would also say that I have a really strong belief that if you're not making your marketing people really, really nervous, then you're probably not pushing hard enough. And what I mean by that is, and in fact, I was at a conference last week and somebody asked me a question about a new product we're bringing to market. It's an over-the-top video product. I'm really excited about this. It doesn't matter what it is. Well, what's important is, the guy said, "Are you not concerned about cannibalization?" And I said, "My marketing people are." That's how I know I'm on the right track. All right? If your marketing people's greatest fear is that you're going to cannibalize legacy existing products, then you've tapped into something that the market wants, that the customer wants, and you need to probably double down on that effort. You need to be smart about how you manage these transitions. And I think if you ask me, core competencies at AT&T, managing through these transitions is something we've demonstrated adeptness at doing. I will never forget, this had to be 20 years ago, and I was asked to do a forward-looking projection by our then CEO, my predecessor, Ed Whitaker. And I'll never forget laying out what we thought the wireless business was going to do. And that we said in the next 10 years, which would have been 2006 at that point in time, by 2006, over a quarter of the people in the United States will not even have a wireline telephone. And the general reaction among the executive team was, "You're crazy. There isn't enough capacity to handle that much voice traffic," right? We're delivering video over these networks now. But when you sit there and if you just say, there's no way we can cannibalize ourselves to that extent and survive, that's death, all right?
So fast forward to 2016. What's the crazy idea you're hearing today in your boardroom that people look at as skeptically?
Oh, it's a long list. I will tell you, I've just spent the last 4 months kind of on a tour. I started in Jerusalem, Israel, with the guys at Mobileye and the autonomous driving technology in Israel. Spent a lot of time there with the founder of this company, and here's kind of what he tells you. autonomous car, it's going to require, for every autonomous car, 1 gigabyte per car per mile to make this a reality. Now think about that. Think about how much bandwidth is going to be required for this to be the case. This is like in 1996, our executive team saying there isn't enough capacity to handle 25% of the people using wireless only for voice, right? I believe 5, 8 years from now, this will be a reality. I went out to San Francisco last week and met with the guy at Zoox, and this is autonomous cars as well. And the more you spend time with these folks, the more you realize this is inevitable. This is coming. And the bandwidth requirements to make this a reality are huge. I mean, they're dramatic, all right?
And you've already spent $200 billion, and it's not enough.
It's not enough. So we are now on 4G technology. Well, we've heard about that, right? This is 5G. We have to be on 5G, the next generation of wireless technology, for these to be a reality. But this will be a reality.
Are you able to have a business model that actually recoups any of this major investment? I mean, I'm just asking. I imagine your stock's up 28%. Somebody must think that is going okay. But you know, it is interesting when you look at these large-scale infrastructure investments. You would sort of imagine Carl Sagan in the old days talking about billions and trillions of stars out there. I used to listen to Eric Schmidt of Google, you know, talking about how much would travel across this, and I wondered, Google's not buying that infrastructure or investing in that infrastructure. You are. How do you recoup your investment?
I mean, this is, you get into public policy if you're not careful when you go down this path. But our industry is traditionally one that has high capital intensity. We invest a lot of money, and we catch a lot of grief because we tend to have higher margins than other businesses. You know, the reason you have those higher margins are you have to recoup this investment, all right? And so you engineer your business processes, you engineer everything around generating what in our case is 40% EBITDA margins to recoup $20 billion a year of capital investment.
And what are you going to do about the future now? Are you going to continue? I mean, are there ways when you begin looking at this investment in infrastructure, and you just mentioned public policy, that you can be helped in that or hindered? I'm interested. What would help AT&T to help deliver a 1 gigabyte per mile need in autonomous vehicles?
If you think about what has transpired since 2006, when we all began deploying mobile broadband. I mean, that's really 3G, 4G, now 5G. We began deploying mobile broadband at scale, $20 billion a year for that entire cycle through there. And then what's happened on top of it? Silicon Valley, the app community, the iPhone. I mean, everything has happened on top of this.
Right.
And you've had this innovation cycle that has been, I think, unparalleled in our industry. I mean, in the 140 years that you spoke of. I think if you paused and said, what did government do that facilitated that? You couldn't name what that was. What government did is there was a law passed in 1996. There was a law, the Telecom Law,
Act, right,
that said wireless technology and the internet, we need to keep hands off, keep regulation very, very light touch. It's in the statutory language, keep hands off to allow this to flourish. Now that by itself screams volumes. And I've always said in this industry, if you leave it alone, it will attract capital. Capital flows to this industry very freely and very readily. What government tends to do is tinker around and toy around, and then what that will do is cause investment cycles to do this. I've never seen a government regulation or law that caused investment to do this. It can only make it do this. And so that's why we're somewhat evangelists about light touch regulation here is critical, because capital is going to flow here if you just leave it alone.
You know, one of the things I'm interested in is when you are sitting at the top, do the innovations in AT&T sort of percolate up to you so you have a sense of them? I mean, you're so big, you basically have a nation that you're running in terms of the people you're working and are operating for you. And you know, how do you navigate it? Because one of the points that has come up here today is how do you know a smart innovative jump or a process innovation jump versus a strategic innovation jump? How do you, as a leader, inculcate your leadership team with doing that, and how do you deal with conflicts that come up where one part of your company is trying to whack another part of your company?
So I operate on an overly simplistic premise, all right, and that is take any functionality, and I don't care what that functionality is, and make it mobile. utility of that functionality.
So that's the Randall Stephenson line.
Utility
Make it
of
mobile.
utility of that functionality will skyrocket. And I can go through music. I mean, what happened when you made music mobile? The Walkman, the Sony Walkman, right?
Right.
What happened to utility? And ultimately that led to an iPhone, and music utility has skyrocketed. And BlackBerry made email mobile. What happened to email? And cell phones made voice mobile. And we had a strong conviction in 2005, 2006, that if you could make the internet mobile, the utility of the internet would explode, absolutely explode. And so we began investing, and then Steve Jobs showed up with this funny device, you know, we thought, that looks like that's how you make the internet mobile, right? And we jumped all over it, and sure enough, the mobile internet has just exploded. Now, we have a new...
Now, you were the first, right, to have to be on
we did the
iPhone.
exclusive back in...
Did you do that? Were you running the company then?
I was the chairman of Singular Wireless. Do you remember Singular Wireless? That was our wireless
I'll pretend
company.
I did.
That little jack guy, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of a goofy little logo, but yeah, we did that. We did that exclusive with iPhone back there, or Apple back then, and it revolutionized the internet, right? We made it mobile. And we are now at a place, and we bought DirecTV. I won't go into this in detail, but we bought DirecTV because we are of a fundamental mindset. We are bought in that if you make video mobile, you make the video experience mobile, utility of the video experience, the consumer experience will explode. And to give you an example, we have done this now, and we've begun integrating product sets, and the NFL Sunday Ticket, we have the exclusive for that. It's now available on your tablet or on your smartphone. First week of the season, week 1 to week 2, mobile utilization of it was up 60%. This last week, again, okay? This thing is just rolling, and the utilization of video in the mobile environment is just exploding. And so we believe this is the case in virtually any utility. You go
See, I'm the kind of guy I'll sign up when you get kind of C-SPAN mobile, right? And you have Senate hearings, and you know.
You know, that's what we call a
this
niche
football
audience,
stuff,
man.
right?
Yeah.
You know, I don't get very much, but one of the other elements of innovation and a company, you and I have had an opportunity to talk about this before. It's a sort of thing, it's not only just innovation, it's having a talent pipeline that you've attracted in, that you've inculcated with this spirit you've brought in from universities not only here but around the world. What is your sense, I mean, what is your real sense of the talent pipeline in the country right now? What needs to be done to enhance it, or do you think we're okay?
No, the talent pipeline is obsoleting fast. And I think we as a country have to deal with this. And in fact, we have this issue going on within AT&T. And our talent is obsoleting. And we're making a move. If you think about what's happened with the cloud, the data center has become virtualized. It's software driven. That's happening in the core network of AT&T. It's becoming a software-driven infrastructure. The number of people we're going to need to operate this network is going down dramatically. Now, demographics take care of that, all right?
Right.
Just normal retirements. But the issue is the 100,000 people that are going to be needed to run this network in the future, like in the next 2 or 3 years, is a radically different skill set to what we have today. We can't go out and hire 100,000 new people. And so we're having to reskill and retool our people. Now, this retooling and reskilling, it's not like we can go to government institutions and accomplish this. And in fact, I've mentioned to you before, I think there's only one area in our society over the last 30 years that has escaped the productivity miracle, and that is education.
Universities.
Universities particularly.
Yeah.
I think they're probably the worst offenders in terms of falling behind the productivity curve. And so we have said we're going to have to find a way to use technology to retool and reskill our people. It's a multifaceted approach, but using technology, we have so far to date had 2 million course completions, 150,000 people have been badged with new skill sets, and we're moving people into these new skill sets.
These are your employees or their programs? I know you've got a MOOC cooperative relationship with Georgia Tech. I remember, and maybe some others. So is that working out? Because a lot of people worry whether folks are seeing through these programs and where you're getting the quality of educational performance and output that you would from a traditional institution.
We started this 5 years ago, and we do big logistical projects. We're really good at big logistical projects. This issue we're talking about 5 years ago, I said, this is the most difficult logistical issue I have dealt with in my career. 5 years into it, I feel like we're going to make it.
Wow.
All right, we are on a pace that's really at hyper speed right now of retooling a workforce, and I really do feel by 2020 we are going to be largely down the path of a retooled and a reskilled workforce. And it's not just the MOOC program at Georgia Tech. That was a big deal. That was kind of our first foray into this. What we did is we said we need some serious computer science capabilities in our company, and we went to Georgia Tech, working with Sebastian Thrun at Udacity, and we got Georgia Tech to give us a credentialed program, whereas today it costs $42,000 to get a master's of computer science at Georgia Tech. We have launched this program, and it's $6,600. We have hundreds of our employees that are gaining these credentials. Now, here's the problem, where I told you our universities are out of step. Give Georgia Tech credit. They worked with us, and they got this done. One of the few in the country that has done this. And by the way, you get this degree, it's the same exact degree and credential you get if you show up on campus and get the $42,000 or $41,000 version of it. It took 2 years to get the Board of Regents, to get the faculty, to get the school, to get all of this stuff done. And you said, this is not scalable, all right? So this is where we made the move, and we said, you're going to have to find a way to do this at scale. And so nano degrees, the badging, and by the way, you have to integrate your
I've been
HR.
thinking we should give nano degrees and badging for people who've attended this conference.
This is powerful. I
you
mean,
know.
I'm serious. This is one of the most powerful things I've been a part of, and I think this is a model for how we educate and tool America for the 21st century. I believe it has to be the model.
What do you think are the lessons you've learned something that you share with others in the space? Because I think there are a lot of players, big players, some small, that are worried about that pipeline, that talent pipeline in the country. I don't see many opportunities where, say, the model of what you think you're on the verge of completing, is that something that, say, Boeing will emulate, or others? Do you think these kinds of ideas
It's inevitable.
percolate? Yeah.
It is absolutely inevitable. I mean, maybe there's some really smart person out there that can figure out how you take the traditional bricks and mortar institutions and retool millions of people for a new economy. Because we're talking about a very different economy that we're asking people to execute and operate in. The traditional modes of doing that are not they're not scalable. They don't work. And so it's going to take technology and new ways of tooling people to make this a reality.
You know, I know you've just stepped down from your leadership role in the Business Roundtable, and in that you were talking to both sides of the aisle, Paul Ryan, Valerie Jarrett, and others on corporate taxes. You were talking about trade stuff. But I'm interested in kind of your sense, because you do have a political sense and a policy sense. What are the ecosystem realities? You were talking about Black Lives Matter the other day, but what are the things you think the federal government or other governments are not standing up and getting done that should be done to help this future that we're pondering right now to be better and more robust than it otherwise would be?
Whether it's business...
Imagine you're running for office. Give us
No,
your
I can't even imagine that. But whether it's running a business or whether it's running a charitable organization or a government, there's one common denominator you better have, or you find yourself in trouble, and that's growth. You have to be biased totally and completely towards growth. And by the way, growth covers a lot of ills, right? With growth, you can afford to do a lot of things that you can't do without growth. And I look at the situation we're in the United States, which is rather subpar and anemic growth relative to the assets we as a country have. And you just ask yourself, why are we not growing? The capacity to grow is here. We use demographic excuses and the baby boomer. Those are excuses. If you look, the reality is, as a percentage of our economy, we're investing the lowest level since World War II in our economy. Now, pick a business. You stop investing in business, you know what the answer to that is, right? That business will begin to decline. It's inevitable. And that's where we are as an economy in the United States. And so you just ask yourself, why are we not investing? And everything about our fiscal structure, everything about our monetary structure, everything is counter to what I would consider an environment conducive to investment. And we tax profits uncompetitively, we tax capital uncompetitively, we tax labor uncompetitively. I can go on and on. But our entire fiscal system is set up to be counter to an investment-rich environment.
What would you do to fix it?
fix the tax code. I mean, I'm a businessman. You expect me to say that, right? But it happens to be just mechanically and arithmetically the right thing to do. I mean, we are in a globally competitive environment. And if AT&T has $1 billion to invest, and there is a regulatory and a tax structure of what we see in the United States, and there's a regulatory and tax structure like we see in Mexico, where are you as a rational business person going to put the next $1 billion? Ours went to Mexico. The tax, the regulatory, the whole environment down there is more conducive to generating returns on that investment than the United States. Now, we still invest a lot in the United States, but you just have to stop and look at that and say, we're uncompetitive. And what do we need to do to make it competitive? And we can't throw up walls and say we're just going to keep it here. We have to change the code, the tax code. We have to change the regulatory environment to make it more conducive to investment.
What do you think is, I know this is a complicated question, but I want to go to the audience in a minute, but as you look at your dashboard today, what do you think is missing on it? You know, what do you think is the blind spot that you as a major CEO in the country have? Something that you may have been thinking about recently, said, you know, my strategic plan for the future as I'm thinking out there, we're not in this corner. Have you thought about that, or do you think you have all the bases covered?
Oh, you never have all the bases covered, not in a million years. The day I retire, we won't have all the bases covered. You know, the things that we are spending a lot of time looking at right now is, you know, and this is out a few years, but where is the media and the content industry going, right? We are doing a lot right now in terms of delivering content over the mobile environment to our paid television customers, over the internet and so forth. And you ask yourself, where is that going? Is it going to way over-index to short-form video? Is long-form video still going to be very relevant and viable 5 and 10 years from now? And so we're spending a lot of time processing that. Where is the world of media and content going, and what role should we play in media and content?
I love you know, if any of you saw the remake of RoboCop, not a great film, but Samuel Jackson was out there in front of a picture of Scientific American in one magazine and The Atlantic in the other, and one of my colleagues, Ta-Nehisi Coates, said, "I've seen the future and we're in it." It was just anyway. Let me open the floor to comments and questions of Randall Stephenson. Yes?
Hi, Christopher Rollison, CSRA. You've talked about the dearth of investment, and I observe that we're in a post-product, post-service economy. Maybe people don't understand experience and how products and services help people create experiences, so they don't know how to invest. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I understand your point, but one has to ask the basic question. I mean, there are just core underpinnings in our market, in our economy, that require investment. Now, I would suggest we, telecom, have maybe been the exception. You know, we have, AT&T, we've invested more through this cycle, including the financial downturn, than any other industry or than any other time in our history. But there are other areas of the economy where in the United States there is an underinvestment just in core underlying infrastructure. I mean, think about infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Why are we not investing in infrastructure? I mean, I'm sorry, but regardless of service models and product models, roads and bridges and highway systems and airports, et cetera, you know, those are still going to be required. They're going to be required 10 years from now and 20 years from now, and we're investing at record low levels relative to the size of our economy. So I would suggest to you on the product and the innovation and the service side, we probably do as well there as any place in the world. Go to Silicon Valley and you see, I think it is off the charts unique.
Other questions, comments? Yes, in the back.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Tiffany Osmina from Northwestern University. I just want to...
Do you think Northwestern's going to be around in 30 years?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think your business model is going to change in 30 years?
Of course. That's why we have online learning now with everyone else. So my question for you is in relation to what are you doing to invest in our next generation of employees? So what are you doing to train students who are at the elementary school level and learning how to program? Because I've heard from my colleagues and family that we have a huge lack of employees who are able to code and program, and that's where everything's at now.
So how about preschool early coding programs?
So this is a really big ocean, and AT&T probably isn't going to be able to address all the education problems in our society. What we have chosen to do, and we started this back in 2007, is when I took this job on, I told the folks in our foundation, stop, freeze everything, because we're a highly regulated company, and so money was
Right.
going to a lot of different places. And I said, what is the area where we think we can move the needle? And let's invest all of our philanthropic efforts and time into that, all right? And we said this high school dropout crisis, remember 2007, how bad this was. We were going to focus our attention on job readiness and high school dropout crisis, and we took all of the money, and I think the first tranche we made was $250 million, and we've upped that a few times. And our first foray into it, we put a lot of money in a lot of programs, and what was interesting was we came back after a year, getting RFPs, putting money, said, now show us the results. What was stunning was you could not measure the effect many of these programs were having. And so we've spent the last couple of years making sure that we get programs that can move the needle, that can measure that they're moving the needle, and then as we find those, we pour more money onto them, and then we try scaling them into other areas. And we've even invested in a lot of profit-type areas that are having a lot of success. And so, you know, I can't say that we have changed society in America in terms of the dropout crisis, but we do believe where we have invested, we can demonstrate noticeable and meaningful and measurable improvement.
I mean, just short form, I want to get another question here, but you gave out this vigorous defense of Black Lives Matter the other day, and you said, look, if we're in this, we need to look at the systematic bias we've had in the company. Are there things you're doing as a company that set a model on inclusion and thinking about talent, thinking about who your customers are, that you expect to be moral examples for others in industry in the United States?
I'm not going to go so far as, you know, to make the boast that you just did.
Just want to give you an opportunity to. Yeah.
But look, this is darned important to us. And I start from the very top. And I say, look, if we as a company don't reflect the society that we serve, that we provide products and services to, from a very selfish standpoint, you're not going to succeed, all right? And so I say at the very top, our board of directors, we better reflect our society. And I think I have one of the most high-quality boards in America. It is a very diverse board, African-American, heavy females. I mean, it's 40% female. You know, I can go down the list, and it is very representative of the communities and the markets that we serve. And then I step down to the senior leadership team, and we work all the way down throughout the organization to ensure that we are reflecting the markets we serve. I just don't think you can be successful without it. Then step back from it and you say, happens to be the right thing to do as well, all right? And I think if you're really going to make your board and you're going to require your executive team to begin to reflect the communities, then you have to put in place discipline, you have to put in place rigor to ensure that you're building pipelines and talent pools and so forth that can make sure you can populate these positions. Right. And that takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of effort. I did come out and made some rather strong statements about the Black Lives Matter movement. But that was more a function. I was speaking to a group of our employee resource groups, and I have a very, very dear friend. And the talk I gave was I learned kind of secondarily some things about one of my closest friends that I didn't know. He's an African-American gentleman. And I said, I reflected that if this guy and I can be dearest, closest friends, his wife and my wife are the dearest, they're best friends, all right? And if I could know this guy for 15, 20 years and not know this about him, then that tells me we're not having enough discussion about race, because best friends aren't even talking about it. And this issue is not going to be addressed if we don't begin to have some very serious and open dialogue. Since that talk, I rarely go someplace where this conversation does not ensue.
Well, it made global headlines. I mean, it made global headlines. It was very rare to have someone of your stature and the scale of your company make that sort of statement, in my view. We'll take a last question right up here.
Hi.
Members. And ultimately, I'm going to have a favor to ask you versus a question. So as a 11-year school board member, we've been very focused on, of course, educating our children to read, to write. We're educating them today for jobs that don't exist yet, as of today, for the future. We're also very focused on communication skills, critical thinking skills.
I'm going to ask you to do a short form.
You got it. So my favor is, it seems that you have contacts in Washington. If you could help spread the word that test scores are not the only measure of successful future employees of yours, that would be great.
I can't vouch for his success in Washington, just so you know.
Because I've had
we've known
none.
each other for a long time. But your thought on test scores and students, and actually your relations with Washington, because you are in Dallas, Texas. You're headquartered there. You've got a lot of traffic through Texas. You've got muscle in the country, and so why, as a parting shot, just answer her question on education and test scores, but secondly, just give us a quick snapshot of how you see the political scene.
Response to your question real quickly, there is not one single metric or measurement that's going to tell us somebody's potential for success, all right? AT&T, when we hire, we don't just give everybody a test and say that tells us whether they're going to be a great employee or not. So it takes a broader view, and I think if I'm an educator, I would have that exact same perception as you. And so you don't have to ask me the favor. I have this conversation a lot, and I actually don't feel too dissimilar than you. I think testing is important, but it can't be the only criterion for evaluating people, okay? The scene in Washington is, it's weird right now. You and I have had this conversation. But there's no place where I go where there is broader agreement and general coalescence around the really big things that need to be done to improve things. Tax reform, trade,
Infrastructure.
even immigration.
Immigration, yeah.
Infrastructure. I mean, there is general broad-based agreement, but it just sits and nothing happens.
I mean, just to validate this point as we close, I embrace name dropping. And in Washington, I had a meeting with Valerie Jarrett right after Randall did, and I said, isn't Randall Stephenson such a great guy? And she said, yeah, I completely agree with him on corporate tax rates and all this. And then I happened to see Harry Reid somewhere, same thing. We kind of schmoozed about Randall Stephenson. Then I saw Paul Ryan at a dinner, and I said, yeah, he makes a lot of sense. You just had about everybody saying yes to what a great guy, what a great package. Why can't you just put them all in a room and get them to agree on what a great guy you are and what, and the taxes, That might be the next step.
If I could do that, I'm way underpaid.
Ladies and gentlemen, Randall Stephenson, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.